All right, here we are in the cantina with our special guest this week, the one, the only Tom Kane. Tom, so great to have you back with us here on Rebel Force Radio.
Well, thank you. Glad to be back. And hey, I'm the one and the only because we don't really need any more.
No, you know what? You're the one and the only because when people hear your voice, they go, "Oh, that guy, that's the guy."
Oh, him, the guy with the BFV, the big fake voice.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you say that, but I mean, we've known you for a long time. We've talked to you. I mean, it sounds like that voice just comes out of you. It doesn't seem like there's any affectation there.
I mean, my completely natural voice is kind of up here. I mean, I've learned over the years that I didn't realize it until I started getting interviewed. And I noticed that when I talk to people, I pitch it up a little bit on purpose because they can hear you better. Higher pitches cut better. Mm-hmm. And I started noticing that, when I'm on stage or whatever, I tend to kind of pitch it up a little bit because apparently people can hear me better because, you're down here like this. It just, a lot of it gets lost. So, but yeah, everyone's like, you don't sound like yourself. And I'm like, oh, here, let me bring it down to here. And I'll put on the big fake voice. And then, oh, yeah, that sounds like it.
So what sort of...
to me, everything's a character voice to me. I mean, no one's going to hire me. No one's going to hire me for this. So I just do characters. And some of my characters happen to be, broadcasters. So.
Well, now let me ask you a question because your voice is the only voice that's heard in every single episode of the Clone Wars.
And I did not realize that until, oh my gosh, Dave made some comment. Dave Filoni made a comment one time. They were giving us crew jackets for the Clone Wars at the end of season 6, and they had little metal bars on the, up here to represent how many seasons you had done. And I didn't think any of them. And he goes, well, yeah, not only do you have one for every season, he goes, we should have like a special platinum one for you. And I'm like, why? And he goes, well, you're the only one that's been in every episode. And I went, well, no, I haven't been in every, because I keep forgetting about the narrator.
The narrator. He's at the beginning of every episode.
Right. And I, when I think of a character, I think of a character, an on-camera animated character. If it's just a voice, for some reason that had never occurred to me that wasn't a character. But
the narrator. So where do you
ask me to sign things? I've had people ask me to sign something as the narrator, and I've actually thought about just having just some 8x10s of just pick any random section of a crawl.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
sign that.
You're the crawl, and I'm not kidding you when I say that since the Clone Wars, when I'm watching a Star Wars feature with the crawl, I swear to God, I hear your voice in my head when that crawl is going on.
I have had many people say that now. That they said even I had a guy that's my age that is now watching these things with his grandsons, and he said, he was taking them back and watching the movies, and one of them looked up and said, where's the guy talking?
It is a dark time for the rebellion.
He goes, oh, well, they don't do that in the movies. And the kid was like, well, that's really weird. How do you know what's going on? And I went, well, there you go. George was right. The kids need the voice.
That's right. That's right. We had Ashley Eckstein on the show a couple weeks ago, and she was talking about her little golden book that she had written for Ahsoka. It's about Ahsoka. And I said, it'd be great if you would just, we were talking about reading it to my kids in the back. Even better would be if you read it to my kids. So now I'm thinking that you need to read the opening crawl, to all the Star Wars films when we're sitting around and watching those.
You know what? That's an interesting idea. The only problem with it is they move so slow. It would be like Empire at War as the Jedi something moves across the universe. The evil Emperor Palpatine is building the third Death Star, and
there'd be Tom saying, "Speed it up, speed it up, speed it up."
Yeah, let's go. Have you? So you've never actually?
We just need to get this video, speed it up 50%, and I'll narrate it. There we go.
Perfect.
Have you ever actually narrated it on a microphone before?
Oh, the actual movies? No, I never have. I
Just,
probably,
just the crawl.
Yeah, I should do that for fun just to see what it looks like. But
Well, let's do it now. I mean,
you got to crawl.
all right. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna email you the copy here, and then you're gonna.
you just happen to have the crawl from a movie.
Of course. Well, I memorized.
Don't leave home without
a long time ago, and I typed it for you. And its subject line is crawl, and send. Just sent it to you. I'm putting you. We're gonna put you on the spot. So.
Oh, wait, where? How do I get that?
This is a cold read.
Did you email it to me? How did you send it to me?
I sent it to your email.
Hold on. Let me look. Let me just go to my email. Hold on a second.
While Tom's doing that, we'll switch to a glamour shot of Tom and his Clone Wars alter ego, Jedi Master Yoda here.
Oh my gosh, you really do.
Yeah.
Oh, this is okay. It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. During the battle, Rebel spies managed to steal secret plans for the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star, an armored space station with enough power to destroy an entire planet. Pursued by the Empire's sinister agents, Princess Leia races home aboard her starship, custodian of the stolen plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy. Bum, bum, bum.
Oh,
that was.
It never sounded better. Never sounded better.
Oh my goodness!
That's too funny.
That's
the first time. That is actually the first time in my life I've read that. That's pretty good.
Well, you are like the Anthony Daniels of the Clone Wars. Anthony Daniels, being in every Star Wars feature of the Skywalker saga, certainly.
Just so you know, I am Clone Wars.
Of course, you did play C-3PO for us in the Smuggler's Gambit, I think it was.
Oh yeah, no, I've done a fairly large amount of 3PO, but I don't publicize it, and I certainly can't sign anything as him because someone gets really mad. So, I get that. It's his
sure.
Voice, I totally get that. I'm not trying to rip the guy off, but yeah, I've done a whole lot of 3PO. I'm in the parks and games and TV commercials and toys and some television shows. And
which character do you sign autographs for the most?
It's a toss-up between Yoda, probably Yoda.
Yeah.
But the toss-up, it's close to Powerpuff Girls. I get a lot.
Oh, the
people
professor,
asking
of
for
course.
Powerpuff Girls signatures.
But Star Wars, it's primarily Yoda, right?
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's I would say probably 75% of all the things people ask me to sign have something to do with Yoda.
Yeah. Now you just jumped right into that narrator voice. What do you base that voice on? Anything in particular? Where do you get the inspiration?
For years, I'd been. I watch old World War II movies when I was a kid. You'd come home from school and, the local stations in the afternoon, back when there were maybe 3 TV stations and a mid-sized market, all they did is run, old war movies and Warner Brothers cartoons. And, every once in a while I would see a newsreel. Something that was from World War II that they would run, before the movies to tell everybody what the heck was going on, over there. And they all sounded the same. It was all, that was just the style back then. I mean, I actually memorized one of my favorite openings was, and it's the same voice. It's actually what I auditioned for when George wanted to say, can you do something like an old newsreel guy? And I had a chunk of it that I'd memorized 40 years ago, and it sounded like this. It goes, as the Nazi juggernaut rolls across Western Europe, America's boys in blue are there, rising into the skies above London with a hearty Heil no to Hitler's Luftwaffe.
Oh my God!
Heil no!
It was a thing about how some American pilots were over there helping the RAF, fight the Luftwaffe over London, but I just rising into the skies above London with a hearty Heil no to Hitler's Luftwaffe. He
That's
couldn't
brilliant.
say hell no, but he could say hell no.
And you jump into that voice with such ease. It comes so naturally to you. But I imagine that Yoda pushes you to a different sort of limit. And I've always wondered this. And Tom, forgive me if I've asked you about this before, but it's worth asking again. Is there a Yoda warm-up that you practice before you go into character? You don't stand alone in a room by yourself going,
no, it's gotten to the point where it's just there. I always tell people I get people ask all the time, like, what warm-ups do you do? And what I'm like, I breathe. And I'm lazy. I mean, there's a lot of guys, James Arnold Taylor and a few like him that, D. Baker, and they work at this. I mean, they'll sit in front of a mirror and contort themselves to try to see if that affects a sound or a voice or adds a nice twist to a character, and they come up with some pretty amazing stuff. I'm just lazy. I mean, if I can do the voice, I do it. And if I can't, I'll say call, and I'll name 3 guys, call him or him, because I think they could help you out. But the Yoda thing, though, I mean, my only thing is that I'm trying to keep it as close, to Frank as possible. And I'm not trying to do a dead-on impersonation of Frank. I mean, it's like my Morgan Freeman. When people, my God, that's just perfect Morgan Freeman. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm like, play me next to Morgan, and you're not going to be fooled as to which one's actually Morgan Freeman. But I'm able to capture enough of the hooks and the essence of it, that when people hear it, they think it's Morgan Freeman. And the same thing with Yoda. Again, you play me against, Empire Frank Oz, and you're going to know which one's Frank. But for whatever reason, thank God George agreed 24 years ago, that, I came close enough and I captured sort of, Yoda's essence. And I've been doing it since then. So
24 years.
But I do once in a while. I mean, I used to. I don't anymore. But I used to have a sample on my desktop where if I ever started going, oh God, I'm losing it here, I would play it for 10 seconds and repeat it to try to. And once in a while, I still do that. I mean, I don't have to seek it out very much, because just in my day-to-day existence, I see and hear enough Yoda stuff. That's vintage Yoda, that I get exposed to it every week somehow. So I'm constantly getting some reminders of what, the ultimate target is. And so, I very rarely anymore have to, Google a chunk of, original Yoda. But
Well, if you ever run...
capture enough of him, I do. The fool people, I do. Yes.
That's one neat thing you've added to Yoda is him always saying yes all the time. He punctuates his sentences often.
I do that, and again, he didn't do that maybe once.
I think maybe
Twice.
once. I can't remember
for
exactly.
some reason, every time I do that, it seems to cement that that's Yoda.
Yeah.
And the same thing with a little giggle. Once in a while, I'll put a little, you don't judge me by my size, do you? I'll put in just that. And again, he did that maybe 2 times. But if I put a little of that in there, or
What,
It
Tom?
worked.
What was the first Yoda gig that you got? Was it the Gendy Clone Wars series?
No. The very first Yoda gig I did was in the 90s. It was a game. I'm as far as I know, since probably the late 90s, I've done almost every Yoda that's been done.
So you're talking about one of the LucasArts video games that you did in the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, they've told me for years I've been in more of those by a factor of 2 or 3 than anybody alive, and it's because of the combo of Yoda and 3PO.
Do you still remember the first time you auditioned for Yoda?
Oh man, I don't. Name the first or second Star Wars game.
Yikes.
I couldn't. I guess what I'm getting at, you go into the studio to audition for Yoda. Did you know at the time you were going out for Yoda?
No.
It was just kind of, hey, do you do a Yoda?
Yoda. The first thing I actually got was 3PO. And again, it wasn't because Anthony was unavailable or a problem or anything else. It's just that there was no technology to record a paragraph of dialogue from London. in Los Angeles. There was no ISDN. There was no internet. There, if they wanted to get, three lines is 3PO, they had to fly somebody over there and run a studio. And that was crazy. And especially because there was no budget for any of these things back then, because George everybody was still like, someone's going to play this on a computer? And what? That's just ridiculous. Everybody thought the whole thing was just a flash in the pan. And of course it all looked terrible. It was all jerky and blocky and, awful. And so, in fact, George, the very first game that LucasArts did was called The Dig. And it was sort of a bit of a little Indiana Jonesy thing with archaeologists and ghosts and spirits and magic. And, it had a lot of indie vibe to it. And the reason it was that is because George, again, was like, what? What's this? You're going to play it on a computer? And so he didn't want the very first effort that Lucas did in the game world to be a Star Wars game in case it flopped. So the very first thing they did was called The Dig, and I'm pretty sure I was in that. And that's how I met. That's how I got involved in the Star Wars stuff, is with that one. And then the second game was a Star Wars property. And at first they just were hiring me to do just broad sound-alikes, just British Imperial officers and a TIE fighter pilot. It was nothing specific. The first time I got hired to do an actual main character was, it was actually Boba Fett, back when Boba Fett was a Brit and not a Kiwi. And I also did a really bad Tarkin back in the day.
I have some of your credits here in front of me. I'm looking at IMDb. And the earliest credit you have for Star Wars is Shadows of the Empire, the video game.
What year was that?
1996.
That sounds about right. If there was anything before that, it was not much before that. And there is some stuff that's been lost to time. It is funny because I've talked about this with some guys that are my age and older, and the director at LucasArts, who's a freelancer now, and I'm like, am I crazy? Didn't we do something and a something? And he goes, yeah, but there were no credits.
Yeah.
He said there was no room on those discs. We had to pick and choose what we would put on there, and it would take X number of megabytes to put credits on these things. And who cared back then?
That's right.
There's some things that we all did back in the very first year or two that are just gone.
Yeah, people were putting microphones in front of your face. How do you know what it's supposed to be for? It's like, it makes me think of Jimmy Page, the guitar player for Led Zeppelin, was a session musician in England in the 60s before he became famous.
Oh my, you're kidding.
And so he constantly gets asked, did you play on this song by The Who? Did you play on this Kinks record? Did you back up Tom Jones on this album? And he can remember a lot of it. But some of it, he'll listen to it and he'll say, well, it sounds like me, but there's no way of knowing because I played on everything. And that's probably the way it was in the early days of video game production.
But it was. We got called in and we didn't even know what we were reading. And most of the time, it wasn't even credited on the script. It just said Imperial.
For the Star Wars... Star Wars X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, you're credited with Imperial Officer and Rebel Pilot. And this is 1996. And you're credited as Tom Kane, Kayne. What's up with that?
And I have no idea where that came from. It's just somebody filling out paperwork who typoed it. And I have tried so hard. They've got me, some of the early stuff, they have me in as Kaine. They have me as Kain. They have me as Caine, like Michael Caine. And then there's that one Kayne, which is like Kanye. I'm like, no, it's Tom Kanye.
Kanye. You're so exotic.
Kanye.
Yeah. I'm going Kanye. For the ethnic thing. But
you're no relation. You're no relation to Patrick Kane from the White.
I actually sent IMDb a couple things saying that I've never been credited as Kanye. Show me the box. where it says that, because it never happened. I think I would have noticed back then if my first Star Wars game misspelled my effing name.
Now, you're no relation to Patrick Kane from the Chicago Blackhawks, are you?
No. My son, my oldest son, just to screw with me, he years ago put on my Wikipedia page that I was the voice of God in the miniseries Roots. That has now become part of internet lore.
Get out!
It is now shown up. That has now shown up in. I mean, I've corrected it where I can, but at one point I Googled it, and I must have been on 20 different websites listing me as the voice of God in Roots, which I'm going, well, I remember seeing Roots, but I'm pretty sure I was 7.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I wasn't doing a lot of professional voiceover work from Overland Park, Kansas at the age of 7. But, well, I don't remember. It was all a blur back then.
But when you were in Kansas, and you were older than 7, but you got started in all of this very, very young. And for those that are listening and they haven't heard, a decade's worth of interviews that we've done with you, can you tell us a little bit about how that started for you? And I think you were calling, was it radio stations and pretending to be a much older guy, right?
I was 15 years old. Uh-huh. It was the summer Star Wars came out, 1977. And, it was Kansas City in 1977. We had, I'm not joking, 3 TV stations that all went off the air at midnight. And it was, 100 degrees and 98% humidity and no computers, no games, nothing to do but ride your bike. And it was too damn hot and humid to do that. So, I would sit inside and listen to the radio. Like every other teenager, I was listening to the radio and watch the TV, and I started noticing that all the commercials done, all the local commercials, all sounded exactly like each other. And then I kind of went, wait a minute, they're all FM disc jockeys. Every TV commercial was done by local, it was like, come on down to the Waterbed Gallery this Sunday. They were all FM DJs doing their local, making an extra $25. And in most cases, they weren't even getting paid for it. These guys, it was just part of their deal. If you bought, $5,000 worth of advertising on, KY 102 FM, one of their jocks would cut your commercial for your car dealership. Right. Yeah. Well, of course, they all sounded exactly the same. And I didn't know anybody got paid for it. I really had no idea. I just assumed that correctly that it was just someone at the TV station that was just reading the stuff. And I just thought it'd be fun to hear myself on TV or radio and doing something different, doing a character voice or an accent. I didn't know the term dialect back then. I said accent. And so I got out the yellow pages because there was no Google. And I started looking up some of the worst sounding commercials I heard and saw. And I would call the advertiser, the business owner, and say, hi, my name's Tom Kane, and I heard your commercial for your car dealership. And of course, I had no tact. I was a 15-year-old. And I would say, yeah, it sounded terrible. It sounded like everything on every other TV station, radio station, and nobody's listening to it because it all sounds the same. And I said, and I do all these weird voices. And usually by now, they'd cuss me out and hung up. But one day I heard a public service announcement for the American Cancer Society. Utterly horrendous. I mean, just could not have been less professional if it tried. It wasn't even a DJ. And I called the American Cancer Society and said, yeah, I heard your commercial. I didn't know the term PSA. And I said, and it was terrible. and I can do better. Well, maybe an hour later, the phone rings, and it's somebody at the largest ad agency in Kansas City at the time. I mean, they're still around. I mean, they've got the Walmart account, Sprint, a billion-dollar agency. But back then, they were one of only a few in town. And it's just some guy on the phone saying, "Yes, Tom." I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, did you just call the American Cancer Society and volunteer some voiceover work? Well, volunteer went over my head. Or he said volunteer to donate some voiceover
Oh, yes.
work. Well, donate went right over my head. I'd never heard the term voiceover work, but I put two and two together. And I said, well, yeah. I said, yeah, I just, the commercial sounded terrible. And I thought, if you wanted someone to sound better. And, on the phone at 15, I sounded like a professional. I kind of did my big fake voice. And he goes, wow. He goes, well, we've got our annual fundraising spot, and we're doing it pro bono for the American Cancer Society. And sure, we'd love to have a professional voice on it. I'm like, okay. So he's like, told me it was Thursday at this time, and here's the address. Well, I had to have my daddy drive me because I didn't have a license. And, I walk in, and they walk up to my dad. And they're handing him the script and thanking him for doing this and how grateful they are. And after about 20 seconds, he kind of puts his hand up and he goes, no. He goes, it's that kid over there, the guy in the fringy cut off Levi's, and my white Stan Smiths that were stained green halfway up from cutting lawns for $1 a piece. And the guy looks at me like, "What? You're the guy I talked to?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh God." He goes, "Have you done this before?" And I'm like, "No, but I couldn't sound any worse than what you had."
Nice.
And he goes, "No, you don't understand." He goes, "We've rented the studio. It's the big annual thing." And he goes, "Oh." And I said, "Well, let me try it." Like I said, it sounds, what you have is horrible. So he walks me back and he's just shaking his head, and I have no idea what I've done. And the engineer puts me in. He set me up on the mic, and I look through the glass, and I see this poor guy getting his ass chewed by the creative director. He's just like, and I look up and I go, "Would you like this in some kind of accent?" And the creative director hits the talk back and he goes, "What?" I said, "I was thinking this might sound good like the Pepperidge Farms man." And he goes, you can talk like a 75-year-old man from New England? I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And he went, "Let's hear that." So I did. I just went, every weekend, a couple dozen Kansas City families have a couple dozen garage sales. But on July 1st and 2nd, 1,000 Kansas City families are going to have just one garage sale. A very big garage sale. A sale so big, as a matter of fact, it'll make the walls of the Glenwood Manor Convention Hall bulge. We call it the Kansas City Garage Sale. All the proceeds go to the American Cancer Society, but all the bargains, well, those go to you.
Brilliant.
I don't remember it. And,
wow.
And the engineer turned around and he said, "That was 29 on the dot." And I look up and they're both going,
"What?"
Yeah.
Well, I feel like,
wait a minute. Take two?
I feel like we only know half the story, because what led to this 15-year-old kid getting that moment? Obviously, you, as you were saying, listened to the radio a lot, watched a lot of TV. Were you doing voices from a young age? Was it just something you picked up on?
From childhood, I was a mimic. I would just mimic what I heard on television. I was supposed. Before they had a name for it, I had ADD out the eyeballs, and my first grade teacher, Mrs. Arnold, used to actually tie me to my chair with jump ropes, which probably wouldn't fly today.
No, I don't think so.
And I learned, though, very quickly that even though I was immobilized in my first grade little chair, I could still get all the attention I wanted by talking in silly voices. And pretty soon I was realizing I was getting a lot of laughs by just mimicking characters that I saw on I Love Lucy and cartoons. I was trying to do my best, but
Yeah, what's up, Doc?
Bad versions of Warner Brothers cartoons, and getting a lot of laughs from my fellow first graders. And
Wow.
So I just kept doing that. My mom told me once that when my grandpa was, I was like a 3-year-old. And she said I used to wander around, and he'd be watching a Kansas City Chiefs football game, and when Len Dawson would fumble the ball, he'd cuss at the TV in German because he was a German. And I would just mimic whatever Grandpa was saying, and he would just chuckle, and he would turn to my mom and my grandma and go, "If you had any idea of what the kid was saying, you wouldn't think it was funny." He said, He said he's got a pretty good German accent and he's pronouncing the words correctly. And he goes, but I'm not telling you what he's saying. Because he was cussing.
Oh, sure.
So, but anyway, yeah,
Scheisse.
I that's where, and Star Wars had a lot to do with that. That's what kind of was my motivation for starting to make these phone calls, is I went and saw a movie that, like everyone my age, it just, changed my life. I just sat there, everything movie-wise for people my age was before I saw Star Wars and after I saw Star Wars. And
True.
that movie was just packed to the gills with character voices and British baddies and Darth Vader and C-3PO and every, I'm like, it was everything, everything. And so, of course, like every other 15-year-old in America, I spent the next, 2 months, I saw the movie 12 times. And I was doing like every other kid, trying to do Darth Vader and, your thoughts betray you, young Skywalker. There is a sister. You have a twin sister.
Oh, that's good.
That was a different movie. But
Now,
yeah,
ladies and gentlemen, in
I'm
our
trying-
audio podcast listening audience, you did not see that Tom Kane was holding the Sierra Mist can up to his mouth.
Well, and that's how I get an accurate. Actually, I was doing 3PO for something, and
At Smugglers.
Skywalker's. One of the guys from Skywalker came down. This is in the 90s. First time I was doing 3PO, or maybe no, probably second or third time I was doing 3PO. And the sound guy came down, and he was telling me about all they have to do to process 3PO and Vader and the millisecond delay and all this stuff. I just picked up an empty Coke can and I went,
Hello, I'm C-3PO, human cyborg relations, and this is my counterpart. Shut up, Artu. I'm recording a podcast. Oh, dear.
Perfect.
he just looked at me and he goes, oh, thanks. You just negated my whole career with an empty Coke can. I have no idea who it was. I'll have to ask Matt Wood, because he might have been there back then.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He was either in the sound department by that point as like an apprentice, or he was still testing video games, because that was his first job.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
LucasArts, he
Yeah.
was just sitting in cubicles playing video games and getting paid for it.
Right. He got the job by sending them a fax.
Oh no! See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. They were so impressed that somebody else had a fax machine, so they hired him.
It was so easy to get jobs back then, wasn't it? Though,
Well, in the video game business in the 90s, it was, because, like I said, everybody was like, "What is this weirdness? What? It's not a TV. It's not a movie, for God, sure. For damn sure, it's you're watching it on something with a speaker the size of a dime, and it's jerky and crappy and everybody's like, what are they doing? So yeah, everybody was still, for the first few years, everybody was just so baffled by the whole idea, except for the nerds that were suddenly going, oh my gosh, I'm finding something here that it's made for me. So yeah, I imagine they probably were thoroughly impressed that they got a fax from some unknown kid wanting to have something to do with this weird, bizarre thing that almost nobody had heard about yet. So.
Very true. That's a true story. Do you still do video game voice work?
Not much. I limit myself to Star Wars properties, and if there's something else that's just so freaking awesome, I can't. Like the Batman stuff, I did all the Arkham things, and for 10 years I've been Takeo Masaki in Call of Duty, and just because I love the character is so awesome. Even though it's a throat ripper, I do Takeo with all gladness. But yeah, he's tough on the voice. He's a this weapon has no honor.
Jeez.
Fight for the glory of the Emperor. Which
amazing.
Kind of, in this day and age, I was kind of amazed the last couple of years they let us all do it, because it's not politically correct anymore to have an old white guy doing an Asian character. But I can get away with it because I got 3 Asian kids, so I always point to that and go, oh no, they say I'm authentic sounding, so it's okay.
Early on, when now I've had a very limited voiceover career compared to you, the great Tom Kane. But in my limited work, I noticed very early on that when I would offer up things like, well, I could do a British accent, they would respond, well, if I wanted a British accent, I would hire a British actor. And so I said, oh, okay. All right, well, I guess I'll take that skill set and put that somewhere else in, like up my butt,
Well,
I guess.
but you know what? That's a third of my work is doing Brits and Aussies and an occasional Scotsman or Irishman. But and the thing is I outbook the real Brits. I always have, and the reason is when they do audition a real Brit, it comes with, again, and there's a few Brits that have lived in the U.S. long enough and done U.S. voiceover work long enough that they've learned the trick that I learned, but they do it in the opposite direction. They read it with the accent, but they inflect it like an American, because that's what Americans are used to hearing. And if they do it in full proper BBC inflection, it's so British that it's hard to make it sound like a normal commercial. Because if you've got something that's, you're listening to BBC One, and if they do it the way they're all taught to read it back in the UK, then it sounds absolutely stilted and a lot like John Cleese.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing. Yep. I was just hearing John Cleese.
Yeah,
exactly.
So what I learned was that I put on the same voice. I can make it sound, upper crusty if you want that sort of thing, but I read it exactly like an American would read it. I inflect the words exactly like an American would inflect them. So it sounds as though, I'm reading it the way they're used to hearing it, but just with a different dialect.
Yeah, Tom, you're like Chinese food for accents. Like we have Chinese food in America, and it's not
one of the silliest things I ever did. It's a good compliment. Dara O'Farrell, who's the director for most of the Star Wars games over the last 20-some years, he's Irish. And I always used to try to mimic his voice because I'm like, I'm working with this guy for years, and he's got this lovely Irish accent. Well, one day I auditioned for, and again, this commercial is layers of stupidity. It was a commercial for O'Doul's Amber Beer. And for those of you who are too young to know or don't, O'Doul's is non-alcoholic beer. There's no alcohol.
Right.
You can drink 10 gallons of it and you won't get a buzz. So the point of this commercial was the setup. It was a radio commercial. The setup was, I'm Irish. I'm in an Irish pub in Ireland, and I'm sitting in front of an O'Doul's Amber Beer, and I'm waxing poetic about an O'Doul's Amber non-alcoholic beer. Which is, again, layers of just never going to happen.
So true.
So anyway, I auditioned for the thing. And again, I was the only non-Irishman in the audition. The rest of them were Irish guys. Well, they were so thick, you couldn't understand half of what they were saying. Right. And I got the job. So I'm cracking up. I'm showing up to the session. And of course, they thought I was actually Irish. Shh, Logie Bear. I've got a rampaging 10-year-old.
Oh, it's okay. We're all stuck at home, and it's so nice to hear that you're there with your family, and you guys are all safe and sound right now.
Everybody's good.
That's
but
great.
yeah, and so I record the commercial, and all I'm doing is Dara. I'm doing Dara O'Farrell, my Irish producer from LucasArts. I'm just trying to do my best, light Irish accent. It's like, and the tagline was O'Doul's Amber, a taste worth toasting. Anyway, so about a week goes by, and I'm at my kids' soccer games, here in California. And one of the moms is from Scotland. She's from Edinburgh, Scotland. And I was always joking with her that I got to listen to you because I get your Scottish accent down. And she goes, is that you I heard the other day on an O'Doul spot? And I said, yeah. She goes, I thought that was you, but she goes, I couldn't believe they had hired you to do it. Instead, I told her, well, that's because the real Scottish people don't sound right. And she goes, well, you weren't bad. She goes, you got a wee bit of Glaswegian in there. And I said, what? I didn't know that someone from Glasgow was called a Glaswegian.
Uh-huh. Oh.
And she goes, yeah, you got a wee bit of Glaswegian in there. And I'm like, what the hell is Glaswegian? She goes, someone from Glasgow. And I went, oh, I did? She goes, yeah, just a wee bit. And I went, oh, okay. So the next time I worked with Dara, I said, I thought I was doing a pretty good imitation of you because I was trying to do your voice for that O'Doul spot. And apparently I drifted into Scottish now and then. And he just started laughing. And he goes, well, you did a better accent. You did me a little better than you thought you did. And I said, why? And he goes, because for 8 years before I moved to LA, I lived in Glasgow.
Oh, there it is. I tell you
And
what,
I went, oh my God! Well, thank you. That's the best compliment I've gotten.
Wow.
I even picked up your half-breed Irish accent.
You're Glasgow. That's amazing. That's
So
amazing.
Just so you know, if you meet someone who's from Glasgow, say, "Oh, so you're Glaswegian." And they'll be like, how do you know that?
So how excited are you to have fresh episodes of the Clone Wars out there now?
Well, it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's weird. I get to enjoy them as a fan because they don't send me the whole scripts, and they haven't for a long time. Just for security reasons. If you're not in the studio in LA, then they just send your lines to you. So and I actually got happy with that after they did it the first season or so, because then I was able to, because there's almost a year. It's gotten less now. Now it's about 9 months, but there's almost a year between the time we record them and the time they air. And that allowed me to forget what the heck I did. So, I mean, I'm just now catching up. I think I'm only up to episode 5. And I'm going, these are, again, they're new to me. I'm getting to watch them like a fan, and I'm going, I don't remember what happens here.
Yeah.
So for me, it's great because I get to just be like everybody else, and I'm like, what the heck happened just now? Oh my God. So
seeing them on television again really does remind you how unique that series is in terms of the visual quality and as well as the quality of the cast. The voices behind the characters. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but there's nothing quite to that level of the Clone Wars.
Well, and I at first I thought it was just my imagination, but then I read something from, I think it was Dave, but they even upped the game with the animation. I mean, it's higher resolution. It's the shadowing is better. It just looks so good. I mean, I was looking at that and I had a freeze frame of it. And my wife actually was just staring at the freeze frame because I'd gone to use the restroom. And she just was looking, she goes, God, that's artwork. That's just a piece of artwork. Mm. And I'm like looking at it and I looked at it as a still frame and it was a character. And I'm going, yeah, like you could hang that on your wall. It was just gorgeous. And, but yeah, it's just great to hear because it's all of us at our best. I mean, it's Ashley has never been better. I mean, everybody, we're just, because we knew this was the end of it, and we just poured our hearts into it. So, but it's good.
Well, Dee certainly brought a lot of versatility to that first arc, the Bad Batch arc.
Oh, yeah.
Playing all those characters and giving them all just such distinctive personalities and voices.
Well, he's always been amazing at that, but that hit it out of the park.
Yeah, he was great. James Earl Taylor last week was impersonating you. I should bring that up. I should have grabbed the soundbite and I could have played it back for you, but I didn't do that. You'll have to. Well, just you, just the Tom Kane character.
Yeah, the one that we all do. We just say Tom Kane. That's
Tom Kane.
We all do that.
We all do that.
We do all do that. I mean, it is funny because to us it's all just voices. And no one's trying to pass themselves off as anything else.
Right.
But when you've sat next to somebody for 7-8 years and you're listening to them do stuff and you're just like, oh, how does he do that? I was like, that's an interesting sound. And you're not trying to rip them off, but it's just, it's for us, it's homework. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sat and listened to Corey. And you look at Corey Burton, and you always like, how is that voice coming out of that guy? Mm-hmm. Because he just could not be physically further away from Count Dooku if he tried, and certainly Cad Bane and whatever. So I mean, I can't count the number of times I've gone, what is he doing to get that sound? And I'll try to go, yes, I'm trying to do Cad Bane, or what? And I'm trying to do Count Dooku. I'm like,
Zero the Hutt.
Oh, Zero. Oh, yeah. Well, Zero, he said that Zero's supposed to be Truman Capote.
Yeah, right? That's right. Yeah. You have to
grasp that. I have no idea who Truman Capote is anymore. But
right, I was going to say,
him, and you're like,
he's a hit with all the kids these days. Now, I've often thought, Tom, that when you were talking about growing up and being able to mimic, and it's amazing that you say how it was something that you had since you were a kid, maybe even 3 years old. I think it's a type of ear, the way some musicians just pick up playing an instrument without ever taking any lessons. They just hear it and they're able to, manifest it outside of themselves. It's a very
well, and I've tried, I've made analogies to artists before, and I kind of don't do that anymore, because when I do, I think people think I'm comparing myself to like some master painter, which I'm certainly not. But I always say there's a story. It's an apocryphal tale, I'm sure, but there's a story that Mozart, who never took a music lesson in his life, and composed Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star at an age when he couldn't actually see the keys yet. The story is that he reached up on it wasn't even a piano, it was a harpsichord, I believe, and just would pound on the keys because he saw his father or somebody playing. And before he could even see the keys, he would just reach up, and somehow one day they walked in and he was going bum 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 bum, and he would replicate it. The kid composed Twinkle Twinkle Little Star at the age of 2. But the story goes that, he was only 21, and he had a symphony that he had done, and he was in the court of whatever the king was, and some fop came up to him, some hanger-on at the royal court, and was going on about how brilliant the symphony was and how great it was. And then he says something like, I've been thinking of writing some symphonies myself. And Mozart supposedly looked at him and said, of course, this is all in German, but he looks at him and he said, well, symphonies are very complicated. They're very, very complex structures. You might want to start off with like an etude or something that's simpler, just to sort of, work your way up to a symphony. And the guy's response was, well, how hard can it be? I mean, you were composing symphonies when you were a child. And Mozart just smiled and said, yes, that's true, but I never had to ask anybody how to tell me to do it. But that, and again, I don't tell this story much anymore because I'm thinking, oh God, is he comparing himself to Mozart? And God knows I'm not. But the point is, some people are born with things.
Right.
That's the whole point of my story. I mean, I'm pretty safe in my assumption that Van Gogh didn't take lessons in how to paint. Da Vinci probably didn't take a lot of lessons. These people are born this way, and again, I'm in a way I'm denigrating myself because that's why I said earlier, I'm like, I'm lazy. If I can do it, if it's naturally there, I'll do it. If not, I don't, because again, part of it is I don't know how to learn to do a new voice. I really don't. I'm like, people are like, oh, how do you come up with that voice? I go, I hear it and I go, and if it's there, it's there. If it's not, I say, call James Arnold Taylor, call D. Baker.
So, Tom, do you find that you gained your love of Mozart from your foul-mouthed German grandfather?
Ja, bestimmt, du bist ein ausgefallen.
Oh, my God. Do I have to bleep all of that now?
No, it's not real.
There is a large contingency of Star Wars fans in the country of Germany who download this show.
No, nothing. Let's see, how to say it. Es war nicht richtig. Es gibt Schweindeutsch, Kinderdeutsch. Es ist nicht schlecht. So
I'm going to have to bleep that.
But I said, don't worry. It's baby talk. It's child German.
Okay, okay.
Big German, and none of it's bad.
Well, das ist gut.
Es gibt keine schlecht. Nein, yeah. Something like that.
Well, I do expect fan mail from Germany to start spilling in now at an increasingly large rate. So, Tom, you've been great to spend some time with us. Can I ask you, will we be seeing Yoda in one of these final episodes? Can you reveal that to us?
I think so.
Okay.
He's not in. He's only in a few. He's only in a couple of the season because they quite purposefully wanted to focus on the clones and Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Because they had. I mean, maybe lightning could strike and they'll continue it, but we're pretty sure this is the end of the Clone Wars. So
yeah,
they wanted to focus on what the fans wanted, and that's the resolution of the clones and Ahsoka and what the heck happens with Order 66 and
sure.
And frankly, none of that involves Yoda, and it doesn't really involve and it doesn't involve much Obi-Wan. So you may not be seeing much of some of these characters compared to prior seasons because again, this is kind of not their wrap up because Yoda goes on, obviously.
Right. And Yoda went out.
Goes on.
Yoda went out with a big bang at the end of season 6 of the Lost Missions.
Yes.
That multi-parter where he actually ventured into the realm of the Force itself, which was really
Oh yeah, that's still my favorite.
Amazing.
No, that's my favorite scene ever, where I get to fight, Dark Yoda. I mean, that was ridiculous for me.
It was so great. It was so great, and definitely worth a rewatch. As we've been doing that with our Patreon audience, rewatching the Clone Wars series, season 1.
Fun.
Yeah, it's been a blast to reconnect with the show and now have fresh episodes and fresh conversations with amazing talent like yourself, Tom Kane. It's been really worth the wait, I have to say. And so I'm
sorry.
so happy.
I just was looking over my brown lab decided to jump up on the couch with me. Hey, Daisy, say hi.
Hey, Daisy.
Hi, Daisy.
Hey, Daisy. Oh, that's a good
face.
girl.
Oh,
She's
so
a
cute.
sweetheart.
Well, you're dealing with a couple of dogs.
Getting a little gray in the muzzle, but
Oh,
it happens to
I
all
wouldn't
of
know
us.
anything about that. Oh, no.
hey, you look good though. You look
Little
great.
gray in the muzzle.
That's fine. Say it loud and say it proud, Tom. You look fantastic, man, and it's so good
thank you.
to hear you back with the Clone Wars and see you here with us on Rebel Force Radio, and know that your family's all there with you, and you guys are getting through this mess the best you can.
Well, we can, and you back at you. And I'm glad to be back on your show. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you're the first guy that ever interviewed me.
Wow, that's incredible.
No, I mean seriously, but wasn't it like 12 years ago?
Oh,
More?
Easily,
Well,
2000.
I think you really were. I think you were. You're the first one I remember.
Yeah. Well, we had so much fun.
Hey, that's
Just
as good as being the first.
We actually had way too much fun a few times.
yeah, especially as the evening went later and later.
Oh yeah, isn't that weird? Something about those cons. Learned about the cons that just gets wackier the later it gets. I don't know.
Oh
why.
no, late night Tom Kane has been a pleasure over the years. Let me just say.
That's why I'm on fizzy soda now.
Hey, we need to stay healthy. So if Sierra
That's right.
listens what does it, then that's
That's right. There you go.
Like I said, you're looking fantastic, and hopefully we can reconnect once we're all set free again, whenever that happens, and maybe be able to hang out in person a little bit, like late nights in downtown Peoria, Illinois, with you, me, and Daniel Logan. How we ever got out of those circumstances alive, I'm still amazed. But
Daniel has definitely calmed down as he's grown up, but I do sometimes miss the teenage wild Daniel Logan.
Yeah, I know. I have a feeling it's bubbling under the surface there.
Oh,
and,
it's always there. I'm sure it's always there.
I'm bracing myself for the grand comeback. So we all have our second wins at some point or another. Well, Tom, again, a pleasure. Is there anything you want to lay on us as far as things maybe outside of Star Wars that we should keep our eyes or ears?
No, I've just got to. I mean, fortunately I'm still keeping a little busy during all this silliness. There are ongoing Star Wars projects that will be out in the next year, and that I can't really discuss. But there's a lot coming down the pike, both in the animated realm and live action that I'm involved in. So part of the reason I moved back to LA was to pursue some on-camera work. I don't know if there's going to be any on-camera Star Wars stuff, but maybe. One never knows. But they may need a. You never know. They may need a 6'4" alien or something.
Oh, who doesn't?
Jim, we forgot to ask the most important Star Wars question that we could possibly ask these days of Tom Kane.
What's that, Jason?
Well, he's the voice of Yoda. So the question is, how much do you love Baby Yoda?
Oh my gosh, so much.
Yes.
But again, it doesn't really have anything to do with the fact that I do the voice. It's just, who doesn't love Baby Yoda? I mean, come on. I saw that thing and I was slack-jawed like everyone, and I turned to my wife and I went, "Oh my God, they just hit it out of the park." I'm like, wow. But
it's awesome.
But yeah, but it is funny. I can't tell you how many people assume that because they're the same species that somehow I know all about it.
Well, of
come
course
on,
you
you're
do.
not gonna- Yeah. Oh, sure. John Favreau sends me a script every week and says, "Here's what we're thinking of doing with Baby Yoda. Is that okay with you, Tom?" And I go,
Does it feel okay?
I got some suggestions here.
It's just
Sit
not,
back
it's not,
with
just
the
not
red
green enough, John. You make it a little more green. Well, it's awesome. Well, we had to ask you, and as Jim said, I echo those comments. It's wonderful to talk to you, and it's always a pleasure, and you're one of our favorites.
Well,
here.
thank
So
you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys.
Tom Kane.
Well, thanks for having me on, and we'll do it again. Let's hope we're not still doing this next month. But
Right? All right. Take care, my friend. Thank you.
all right, guys. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.